Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we've got Nick Jushchyshyn here from Drexel University. And Nick is going to be talking about going from mesh to MetaHuman. This is a new feature that MetaHuman has just added recently, and Nick's going to give us an overview of how that works and answer your questions. He's also here in the first hour, so if you've got 3D virtual reality motion capture questions, he's here, so he can answer your questions in the first hour as well. He's been a member for a long time, so throw those in if you've got a question about that. And now go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we have?
And thank you, Alex. Our first question coming in from the Seventh Scroll in Brooklyn, New York. He says, "Morning, guys. If you were tasked to build a network including storage, audio, and video from the ground up, what elements are a must in your build? We want to do this the office hours way. Appreciate you all."
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, right before the show started, I was saying that I would go NDI, so that's a little different than what some other folks might pick up. So I grabbed a diagram from a build that we did, and this is a shoot for a 24-hour live stream, kind of walk through what we got going on here. We've got 4 cameras, PTZ cameras, got audio. This was sound devices, but that could be Behringer X32. We had a TriCaster for our switcher, pulling stuff in through NDI. We went out through a VDU. That nowadays, the Teradek has some good encoders, but I'd probably go for an Epiphan now. Internet router. We had some MDHXs in there. MacBook. The G-Tech G-Rates for storage would be a good solution. They got bought by SanDisk. I'd be looking at some of that stuff as well. Wireless. We had comms that were ClearComm. We had a talk show that back then that was the Skype way of ingest. I'd probably build a Zoom room to create those ingest points to NDI, but I'll put a link to the chat that shows this whole build, and that might help you get some ideas.
Go ahead, John.
You beat me on your. I didn't have time to pull up my graph there, Guy. So I'm in the beginning stages of upgrading my network. I was trying to remember back how far we've come since I first started doing networks with PhoneNet on the Macintosh, or then ArcNet, which was 2 megabits per second. And so I have visions towards terabits per second. But in the meantime, you should be at least 10 gig with eyes going to 100 gig per second. And then as much fiber as you can put in everywhere. That's what I'd be looking towards.
And go ahead, Danny.
On the network side, if you're going to use CAT cables for your audio, depending upon which system you use, you may need to use a shielded twisted pair.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think that the way I would approach it, and again, we all have different opinions about how to do this, is I still think that if I'm going to build something that I have to use every single day and it's a network that I have to depend on, I probably wouldn't use NDI for that in my personal approach to it, just because there's a lot of things that I can do. The real issue when you get into a network, it's one thing to build something, but when you get into a network, you have to add a lot of things. You have to keep on adding things. Oh, I need this now. I need this now. I need this now. And with that SDI, you can simply slide that in, and route it in. And it's just there's just a lot of things that NDI still doesn't do. And so, at a network, if you're talking about a 24/7 network, the challenge you get into is not being able, you just have to then figure out how you're going to get this device back into NDI, where 99% of all TV networks in the world use SDI. So all the tools work in that flat format. I think eventually we are going to get to IP, and I'm experimenting with more NDI stuff recently. So it's not that I don't think that there's a future in that thing. I don't know if I'd invest in it now if I was building that out. I still would probably, depending on, you have to decide how much graphics and how many other things. So generally what I do is I put in 2 ATEM constellations into a lot of things, primary and backup. That's the one advantage of buying the less expensive switcher, being $10,000, but it's still less expensive than buying a TriCaster, and has an enormous amount of capacity, to go in and out. Again, my way of doing it, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the OH way, is that I build stuff that's pretty heavily leans on Blackmagic, for most of the infrastructure. The one place that you may not want to use a Blackmagic is the routers. So we've grown our routers, and so it's a bit of a mess. Depends on whether you want to do 4K. If you're doing just 1080p and you never think you're going to go higher than 1080p, then they have larger routers that work fine and they're modular. But Blackmagic's really fallen behind. I would say Utah Scientific is probably a better solution, a cost-effective solution to go up to. You just can't have enough routing points. So that's the other thing to look at. And so I think the ones that we put into larger facilities have been Utah Scientific. And then the other thing to think about are patch bays. So 12G patch bays are what we use. Now, there are some that are semi-normaled or normaled. We use non-normaled patch bays, which means you have to put a pin into everything to move content from one place in the patch to another. Bittree is what we use for those. And the reason I do that is that I can pull a pin out. When I pull something out of the patch bay, it means that I know that the signal will stop. Like I don't want it to send another signal through, because you can accidentally send the wrong signal out to the world. So patch bays and routers are really important. Obviously, the switcher. And then, I just feel like Blackmagic has built up a pretty good solution for that. I would look at the Ursa broadcasts. I have some 12Gs that I would not use in a broadcast environment. They're not done yet. so they're good for filming, and they can do some stuff that I need, but they're not ready for broadcast yet. So I would probably go look at the Ursas there. So that'd be my approach to it, just because it's something I've kind of built up around and know it well. The Blackmagic systems tend to be really flexible, and we tend to be able to work on it. For playout systems, obviously there's the HyperDex, but we also use Softron at a network level because it's pretty powerful as far as doing that. Go ahead, Danny. Oh, Danny, you already went. Next question. Sorry.
Simon Ray from Shrewsbury, UK. How frequently do you recommend spinning up old hard drives to maintain data integrity? And what is best practice for keeping data safe on local archive and backup media over the longer term? Having additional and remote copies is a given.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I'm glad that you hold to that. If you don't have it in 3 places, you don't have your media, because in feature film world, that is the content. I mean, the content is your product. So the LTO tape drive is a way of doing it. The challenge there is, of course, the reader and keeping it up to date as well. So while you could put it on the LTO tapes, then, which is a much less expensive way of keeping lots of data, then you have to store that someplace. But also importantly, is you have to make sure that the reader is the same later on, 5, 6, 10 years from now. So there's one way.
Good, Roscoe.
Yeah, to me, scheduling is important because it has to be done on a regular basis. I use Carbon Copy Cloner because it allows me to set a schedule, and it gives me a green light when things have been backed up, and it has a red X if something failed or something didn't go properly to the media of choice. And you can do it on anything that's attached to the local computer.
Good, Mitchell.
Yeah, I agree with Sky. I think getting out to an LTO is the best move. And the problem with hard drives is that it's just a matter of time when, not if, when they're going to fail. And we really don't know how good they are in the super long term. I mean, I've got 10-year-old drives sitting here, and I've got to get my data off them onto something else like an SSD or an LTO, which I don't have. That's the big question. What is the long-term storage device to use nowadays?
Go ahead, Chris.
One of the things you want to ask yourself, Simon, when it comes to archiving data is what do you actually really want to save? I think a lot of times we get caught up in an idealistic approach toward, the absolute, 100% integrity, blah, blah, blah. But really, I mean, do you want to look at some of these things 10, 15 years later? I will tell you that over my shoulder here, I have, and spread out all over Northern California as it is now, hard drives that are 15 years old that still spin up fine. So that's personal experience. They spin up. How often do we spin them? I'll tell you, it's never bothered me when our database of those hard drives has been damaged or corrupted or needed to be updated, because it gives me an occasion to rescan all the drives. And we do that. We'll take the new kid in the office and say, scan all the drives into the database. that I would highly recommend that you get a database that you enjoy, and we can talk about that another day.
Go ahead, Lois.
Well, sort of a follow-on question to this. If I have a hard drive, which I have several of, can I simply take that hard drive, buy a brand new hard drive, copy the material over, and now I've got another 10 years to wait? Is that okay?
Yep. And the good news is that the storage gets less expensive. So you can get, a lot of drives. I went through, we had 500 gig drives and, 1 terabyte drives. That was, and the price of it just keeps changing. So now you can get for the same price, like 12 terabyte drives. So you can kind of condense those into something occasionally. I usually I just go up the price, and there's some point where it jumps a lot. Like, oh, you really want something that's big, that's going to jump a lot. And wherever that is, I step back down to what the incremental. I think the last time I bought some for my home, we buy them all the time at the office, but the last time I bought them at home was, I think, 8 terabytes. I think the guys at the office are buying 10 or 12 terabyte drives. And then you move them in, and they're nice and new. Again, keep them in a good place. When we had a full-time archivist at PixelCore, we had them on a schedule to spin every 6 months. Just plug them in, do a search, put them away. That's all we did just to exercise them. And we had, it was a couple a day because we had over 1,000 drives there. So it was, and to get to Chris's point, it was, those were all kept in, when I store stuff, I don't buy enclosures. I put them on raw drives. So I just literally buy the raw internal drive that you would normally put, a spinning drive that you put in there. And then you can get cases for them that look like cassette tapes. I think Chris has got a cassette tape for it. So you get these little cases, and you have those raw drives in there, and that is that's the cheapest way to store your data. And there's and then you get these what we call toasters. They're like just the thing that you slide that drive into, and then it'll spin up, and you get all the need out of it. You don't need to get all the fancy stuff otherwise. You're paying for that connection to the computer every single on every drive. And if you have a lot of drives, it's not worth doing. So you just want where's the toaster? Where's the toaster? Oh, is that the toaster? Oh, you have a little one there. It's cute. Yeah.
Mine lays down flat.
Mine has 2 so that I can copy it to both primary and backup at one time, or one after the other without swapping them. What were you going to say, Chris?
Everybody is showing all their gear here.
Well, we have a lot of storage is a thing, but I will go back to what Chris said, is that I would highly recommend the things that you really save for a long period of time, be selective, because it becomes its own problem. A lot of stuff that we used to save everything, and now when we look at it, we do still save most things out there, but we are a little bit more selective than we used to be. Go ahead, Roscoe.
One other, you said just copy, and as soon as I hear just copy, I want to say checksum or copy and verify. So that's why I use carbon copy cloner again on the Mac, because there's a mode where it will write the file and immediately see if it can read it, and then at the end it'll do a checksum. So do more than just a copy.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I have all my hard drive storage on the CRL. I think CRLX. This is the DMX 115, and everything plugs into everything else. So I can just pull it out, put it into another device that's doing the transfers. But this is old, as you can see. It's dusty like crazy. So that's what works for me as far as the system.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Well, and if you are going to be just doing minimal backups to get the next new version, Lois, is because oftentimes the connectors change and the iterations of the in and out gazins and gazoutzes. And so that might be another reason to buy a new one, transfer the 10-year-old into the new box so that you've got at least maybe another 5 years, how to get it in and out.
Next question.
Next question coming in from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. What is the best way to move video content from House of Worship off of my M1 Mac Mini? Running out of space, but need to keep content.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, I'm going to hopefully I'll get an advertisement in here for Carbon Copy Cloner. It works. It gives you a method by which you can selectively decide which files to move, because you may not want to move them all, and then it will verify, like I said, when it moves it off onto that other piece of. But I just move them to a large, as Alex just said, a large external storage device. 16 terabyte, I think, is the current. 16 terabytes is probably the current most economical buy.
Go ahead, Sky.
And for context, Tony, when Avid first came out with the 3 gigabyte drive, it was $10,000. And now you can buy, as it was just mentioned, a 12 terabyte at Costco for like 120. So I would get 2 drives from Costco and just back them with using, again, Roscoe's recommendation software. So just back up, and then take it off your M1.
When I was at Lucasfilm, I'm pretty sure we edited all of the major Star Wars, or the End Battle, Space Battle, Pod Race on 7 terabytes. It was shot at, I think, 100 to 1, but it was all AVR6. Go ahead, Chris.
That was a lot of data back then.
It was so much data.
So, Tony, go back and listen to everything we just said for the last few minutes. I will say a couple more things about as you start to move data. You don't have to overdo it, but you can overdo it in the beginning. Everything that we said about buying, cheaper and cheaper drives, it all works to your advantage. When it comes to naming drives, I would avoid cute little themes like Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and Grumpy, and like everybody has like, oh, I'm going to use, Mideastern philosophers. No, just number them, because the order of how they come off of your archive system makes sense. So numbering them makes much more sense than some cute little name.
And Tony, are these Final Cut files, or are they just the raw video files?
They are essentially all Zoom recordings.
Oh, got
so
it.
we do Zoom and record live to YouTube now. So that's the way we're doing it.
Yeah. Getting an external drive and just having a folder and then start just saving to those, directly, I think would make a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida. Thoughts on the Cisco Live keynote yesterday with theater in the round design? Note outboard small stage.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, just looking at the photos, there isn't an anchor point for the person, and they're having to deal with a crowd on, it looks like there's a large screen in one area, but they're having to deal with a crowd that's all around them, and turning to address that crowd would just make it very difficult to cover by cameras. So that would not be my favorite. I wish I had a video I could view to see exactly how they did the live video, because I want my person on stage to have anchor points so that when they're addressing outward to the camera, that it's not difficult for the camera person.
Yeah, what I will say is that years ago, I was asked to do stuff in the round, and I fought it for exactly the same reasons that Roscoe mentioned. After being pressed into it, forced to do it in the round, we won't do it any other way. It brings the audience much closer to the speaker, so a much higher percentage of the audience feels like they're closer because they are. You're basically opening up 3 sides you didn't have before. And putting them in there, and it feels much more like a black box theater. It does mean that the person has to it makes it much harder for them to have, there's all the things that Roscoe said. It's harder with the cameras. It's harder with confidence monitors, so or comfort monitors, or whatever you want to call them, that are going to have their notes that they're going to deal with. So that becomes harder because everyone can see them or not see them, or they can't see them, or so the construction of it is a lot more difficult to make that work. But it feels to the audience like there's more energy. It's less expensive to build than the actual set that we were putting on behind them before. It's a lot less design, because the design is often the people, and so you and that we found to be actually much more, so we've done these with lots of big companies, and they've been really successful for us. But I was definitely in the same boat that Roscoe was in before I started doing it, because for years I did regular keynotes and went into circular, kicking and screaming, like literally, like, this is a horrible idea. We should never do this, and this isn't going to work out. And I was sold. So go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know who did this show. I've actually created content for these Cisco Live shows. I think I've told the story about the guy who pitched way above where he thought he was going to get. He went in and pitched the show assuming he wasn't going to get it, and got it. I think they're still doing it, because I recognize the aspect ratio and the format of some of these screens. It absolutely works. What's interesting is that they've taken this screen here, his confidence monitor, whatever. I think it's more for the visual. Those used to always fly above the stage. They had 4 of them that flew above the stage. And what's cool about them is they project on both the front and the back of them the exact same image. So they have this ring of screens above the stage. And if you're far from the stage, you're looking at the outside. And if you're sitting close to the stage, you're looking up and at the inside. But it's a great show. It works really well.
Yeah, the only thing that we started doing is putting folks on, starting to take the seats that are right around it. Number one is, when I do these, I never want more than 300 people. So obviously there's more than 300 people here. So that makes it more complicated. So I try to keep a few thousand people there. I would prefer to keep it small and intimate, and then put risers up so that the people are actually framing that person. Now, they don't want to do that because they think that they want to separate them. That's because they're using 2/3 inch chips. If you get the smaller ones and you use either full frame or Super 35 and you open them up, you just get this beautiful bokeh of people behind you. You don't really see them. You don't see their expressions. They're just there, behind you. You can see around their stage is flat. And usually people do that because they want that black separation for the head and shoulder shot that they have there instead of someone behind it. And also it's probably the nature of the space. So I like steep risers because it makes everyone, again, feel like they're a lot closer to each other. It's a pretty successful, again, it took me a long time to come around to it, and then it took me a long time. I went from coming around to it to having to persuade clients to go that way, but I wouldn't do it any other way at this point if given my own capacity. Next question.
John Nichols of Concord, California. I'm rebuilding a D-sub patch panel for my evolving fly kit. Does the panel have any tips for working with the small screws and nuts?
I go with Roscoe.
Yeah, just 2 real quick. One is getting used to working through a magnifying glass is something, as you get older, you'll find to be a skill that you'll have to acquire, or if you can do it well. And the second thing is go to Harbor Freight and get one of those magnetic screw holders, because you'll find that the smaller they are, the more likely they are to go spinning away and difficult to find. So having that magnetic nut and bolt holder is very helpful.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Magnetics for 2 reasons, and I'm going to give you a physics tip. If you don't have a magnetic screwdriver, go get a wire, wrap it around the screwdriver, go out to your car and touch the terminals, and it will magnetize your screwdriver, and it works like a champ. And then to gather all those screws, just like Roscoe just said, I have however you say that, Alex knows how to say
neodymium.
And I put all the screws onto a magnet so I don't lose any of them.
Go ahead, Lois.
And you can always use the tip from the craft room, which is have one of those wands that extends out and has a little magnet on the end, and you can just sit there and point it at the screw that fell on the floor and pick it up.
There you go.
Very useful.
Yeah, the big thing that I don't have a specific brand that I like, but because I'm always changing it, but having a really good magnifying glass with the built-in light, super. Like when I used to do smaller soldering, you couldn't do it without it. like literally, yeah. That you can use a headset. I didn't like the headset. I like but I had a headset, and it is better to be technical. You can actually have much more control. But I have the funny thing is I don't have it up here because I gave it to my daughter. She paints these rocks. She paints these rocks, and so I gave it to her. And so I was like, "Here, have a magnifying glass." Anyway, so So anyway, it's one of the ones that kind of pulls over like your mic stand, but has a big magnifying glass on it and has a light around it. And having that just kind of sit, and you can kind of move it around and get to where you need to go and get a 7 or 10x usually works pretty well. And it's just really comfortable to do it for. I used to have to do it about 8 hours a day. And so it was one of those things that I got pretty used to. Anyway, so I would recommend one of those to do everything that you're doing on top of that. And of course, you get a static guard mat to put on it. Gives you a sense of scale. And the other thing to look at for a lot of these things is the helping hands. So it's they're weighted at the bottom, and they've got little pins, and so you can just set things down in front of you and then start to work on them. You can use when I was working at a company, they gave me a vice to do it, which was really annoying. I learned that helping hands were a lot better. All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Alex, you mentioned the idea of having an active airline pilot commentate at Oshkosh. Wouldn't most airlines not allow their employees to speak to the media without corporate PR approval?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
That was actually me who mentioned a guy named Juan Brown, who he is a commercial pilot, but he speaks mostly on general aviation, and Oshkosh is a large or a huge general aviation. I mean, there are the Boeings and the larger NASA-type research people there also, but he's in a union. I guess the union would keep him. I'm sure if he said something against his own airline, it might cause an issue, but he's very knowledgeable, and I don't think it's an issue.
Go ahead, John.
Jeff Widgren is part of our membership here, and he is a private pilot and loves going on remotes and doing work. So I'm sure that he would be a candidate to go talk to the people there in Oshkosh.
Yeah, and a friend of Mike Sweeney's reached out and said he's interested. And I realize I've been going back and forth with him, and I don't have his name. So I'll get his. He just reached out to us yesterday after we talked about it. So anyway, and he's been to Oshkosh 10 years and covering it, and as well as a 30-year flight instructor. So I think that we have a pretty good host for Oshkosh now, and so we will be. I'm putting out a new questionnaire. Instead of putting out a questionnaire for every show, I'm putting together all the shows, like what do you want to do? So you can fill out just one form, and then we'll come back to you and ask you more specifics. And so we'll put that out by the end of the week for that. But I think we have enough. I have to admit, I have heard about Oshkosh. I've seen videos from Oshkosh. I am dying for us to cover it. It's going to be I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Go ahead, Lois.
Could you, for those of us who are not familiar with, describe what Oshkosh is? I happen to know it's a town in Wisconsin, but other than that, what is it?
Well, they make overalls. Sorry, that I grew up in. But they otherwise the Oshkosh is one of the biggest, basically airplane festivities in the world. So there's old planes and new planes and all kinds of planes. It's a plane.
It's like Sturgis. If you know what Sturgis is for motorcycles, where just like everyone from the country rides their bike in, Oshkosh is that for pilots of private aircraft, and it's just everybody flies in. They call it a fly-in.
Yeah, it's an incredible site. I've only seen pictures of it, but I think it's if you're into airplanes, it's the thing. Go ahead, Roscoe.
A little more alcohol served at Sturgis, I believe, than Oshkosh. But the interesting thing is that just the coordination it takes to get imagine all these planes flying into one destination. It literally takes a week of getting people to fly in on schedules. It's if you know how airlines work, you get a bracket where you get to land that airplane, and if you miss your bracket, you might be waiting an extra half hour or something, which is a lot of fuel for those airlines to pay on. So it's a very highly technical, coordinated event, but on the ground, it's amazing to just walk around, and the shows, of course.
So stay tuned. We're going to put something out to see who's interested in being on that crew. But I think we have some good talent already, and we'll try to get 2 or 3 folks. But we definitely have enough to start being interested in it. Next question.
John Nichols in Concord, California. What is your favorite general-purpose labeler aside from a Sharpie and tape?
Go ahead, Lois.
Dymo labelers, I grew up with them. They have a raised surface, so you can tell what's there. That means that they also work for Braille.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I love those Dymo labelers. I can't find them, though. I like the Brother P-Touch, and it's important to get the self-laminating labels so that when you do this to your...
I can't see it. It's autofocus.
I'm trying
that
to
autofocus works so well.
It does when you get your hands in front of your eyes. You can see it on there right now. It's self-laminating. Works great.
We have a lot of these, and so many that I have my name actually labeled on the labeler to make sure that mine sticks around. This is a P-Touch Cube Plus. Don't get the Cube. Get the Cube Plus. You get a wider range of tape, larger tape. This connects to your iPhone or your computer, and you can print stuff out. It's amazing. so you charge it up and use it all day and just start labeling everything. Go ahead, Roscoe.
And the most important technology is make sure you buy the label tape that splits down the middle. It saves you hours if you have to, rather than having to find that edge. So split down the middle labeling.
Yeah, and if you really want heavy duty. Look at the Brady labelers. I mean, they print on metal labels and all kinds of other stuff. Next question.
David Barton from Memphis, Tennessee. Does the office hours crew keep spares of Blackmagic parts? What has the reliability been like?
Go ahead, Nick.
So we use a lot of Blackmagic cameras and gear in a university school setting. So it gets loaned out to students a lot, and it comes back and it still works. So we have older cinema cameras, right? So these are the older, like big block 2K with a Nikon or a Canon mount on the front. And I mean, they've been working for years. We've had a few items where maybe an SDI output would die out, and they don't seem to be particularly serviceable. But it's well beyond its expected lifespan by the time that happens. And we use so much that I've actually gotten a hold of a Blackmagic. This is the micro studio camera. And this is literally just so I can have it in the machine shop and chips of aluminum can go in it and no big deal. This is just so as I'm building custom things that I have something that I don't care about breaking. So that's the primary thing that I keep spares for, that, and we never seem to have enough. So, we have we occasionally record on hyperdecks. We have 8 of them because you just never know when you're just going to add one more. So that's my answer to that.
I go to Roscoe.
Exactly what Nick said. And exactly, Nick, I had an SDI I had a student break an SDI connection off of a micro cinema camera. So there are parts that break off, but the great thing is there's also redundancy. There's an HDMI out of that exact same little micro studio. So we can we're shooting 1080p, so we're good. So yeah, definitely spare parts because of the product itself failing. No spare parts because of, I'd say, abuse or accidents with the systems. Absolutely in an educational setting.
Good, Sky.
I don't know about Memphis, but you've got Nashville just down the road there. Has some great dealers. And also, since I'm not in full production, I have a lot of friends that have equipment. So I keep the community very tight. And then, of course, if you're in the Pacific Northwest, I happen to know a guy.
I took, it must have been 9 years ago, I took a bunch of Blackmagic stuff to Rwanda and just gave it to the school and had them they are still using it. And I got to tell you, Africa is not a forgiving location, to do this stuff. And so now they take care of it, but it has outlasted most of the other electronics, that I took down there, which included like a FS2 and a bunch of computers and all kinds of other stuff. Those power supplies eventually died. And so whatever Blackmagic's doing with their power supplies lasted a lot longer. So I think that it's pretty durable. When they first started, it wasn't very durable. Now there's a couple tricks to it. One is all my cameras have cages on them, or almost all the cameras have cages on them, so that they so they can be it gives them a little bit more if they're dropped, bumped, just creates spacing, as well as having things I can attach to it. So that tends to be one thing that we add to those things. I use convenience panels on the back almost all the time. So I almost never, in a production environment, want people plugging things in and out of the original hardware. I want that hardware to go out to some kind of panel. That protects the hardware from a lot of wear and tear of things getting done. And the panels are not, patch panels are expensive. Convenience panels are cheap and a lot cheaper than the electronics you're hooking them usually. I think that because of the cost of Blackmagic, we're also able to buy primary and backups of a lot of things. So things are less expensive, so we can buy 2. So we do have a lot of primary and backups of things, which I have all equipment fails. I've had a $250,000 Harris router fail right before a show. Anything can fail, that you're doing there. So being able to have it cost effective and being able to have 2 of them means a lot to me as far as how I put that to get together. The only thing that we keep. So we have, as far as spare parts, the controller for the 72x72 router, we keep an extra one of those because if it goes down, the whole router goes down. And then we also keep a couple extra SDI cards, for the 72x72. That's when we're in the field. Those are the things that we've kept a couple extra of, just so that because it's just hard to get in a short period of time. Next question.
And it's from Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. Guy, what is your dream mobile rig on wheels for trade shows? How do you feel about SIGGRAPH? What about doing a roll-through of all the booths with voiceover using the cart on wheels?
Good, Guy.
Yeah, this could be an interesting show. I mean, going forward, that tank concept of having something more with four wheels like we saw during Cinegear with the Make Your Cart Go with the wheel that would actually push it along would be a cool concept. I'd envision having either PTZ cameras and some kind of operator remotely that would be helpful and kind of clean things up. But then you really need like an overview type camera. So it'd be cool to have some kind of like telescopic, pole that went up, and so we could have like a witness cam so people from afar could see. And maybe that's a shot to cut to every once in a while, is just like, here's a lay of the land of where we're at. Maybe a Teradek Bolt transmitter and then hardwired internet. So in a perfect world, the cart would transmit to something that was more stable, because getting cellular inside, especially SIGGRAPH being in Vancouver, there's some international roaming fees that could rack up real quick. But also the carts, if we look at something like Innovative's cart, this is one that can travel as far as breaking down. So it really depends on, do we need something that can go back in a case and travel versus something that we can just have all the time and really be the tank, so to speak. But having a switcher, I'd also love the ability to pull in graphics. So there was a couple booths that we went to at Cinegear where it would have been nice to plug in to their HDMI or SDI. So like we could have just pulled a feed. I could have walked over with one of these transmitters this small and hooked into like Blackmagic's feed, and then we could have saw what the camera was seeing with the actors. Or there was a nice lens flare demo for the Laowa booth that we could have just taken their feed. So for SIGGRAPH, if there are a lot of graphics, it'd be nice to have a 4K transmitter where we could just suck their stuff in and not have to shoot it with a camera. But I mean, if we're moving for speed, somebody who's a good camera op can pull that off. So it just all depends on what kind of crew we can get, how tight we can make it, because it's got to be tight. It can't be loosey goosey.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
What exhibitor wouldn't want to talk to our own Tesla robot walking around? We just have to think of a clever name for him.
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, there is a little bit of research that in some of the booths, it's not apparent exactly what their product is or what they brought to the show that's new and interesting. So really that day before is tremendously helpful, or some research, maybe contacting the vendor. What are you going to show at SIGGRAPH and that kind of stuff. I do worry. We did talk about whether most booths are not prepared for a press plug-in or having a press box and video. They might get a little antsy. So we actually had a long HDMI cable, but the amount of time it would have taken to negotiate plugging into someone's system that they've spent maybe thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to set up is a little bit of an issue.
Go ahead, Chris.
You were talking about like a pole cam or something. It would be super cool if you could put one of those like 360 spherical kind of rigs up on a pole and let us control it, like pan around remotely. Like, and I'm not necessarily saying, audience participation, but like back at our control room where we could like spin around it. I don't even know if that's possible, but it just seems like it'd be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I'm just going to jump in on that. I'm sorry that you could put a 360 camera and stream in 360. Each audience member could individually look around that 360 stream any way they wanted. You'd probably want to make sure that was on a gimbal so that none of the bounces in any cart movement made it through to the viewer, but that could be a secondary stream.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's totally doable. There's great 360 viewers that we could throw on a site, so then everybody can control it, however they'd like. Go ahead, Mitchell.
As we build this monstrosity, a consideration for shipping and size and weight, why don't we just keep it in Vegas? I mean, most of the shows are there. We could just store it somewhere.
The funny thing is, none of the shows were there for the rest of the year.
And we could move it to L.A. or wherever else it needs to go. But it just seems to me that, forget about shipping it. Just keep it there. Yeah,
we'll see. I probably going to experiment in SIGGRAPH with a lighter kit. So, I think that, I just don't, because it's out of the country. I don't know how big the crew is. And I think I'm going to, and I know SIGGRAPH well enough, or I know about it well enough to, so I think that, I think we're going to try to find somebody who can go handheld with a monopod and have a couple different hosts and do a couple things there, kind of going back to our roots, my roots anyway, of doing that. I think that the next time we try to, in my eyes right now, the next time we go heavy is going to be the AES NEB. We may try to play with kits before that, but it's just we need time to figure it out, and I think that 6 weeks won't be enough. so I think that I think Europe, it's putting a lot of pressure on them to build something and try to get it. And again, I have a lot of concern. I mean, I've been to IBC a lot, and I have a lot of concerns about navigation of any kind of kit at IBC. So like any kind of rolling tank or whatever, because the place is a mess. So the show itself is a lot of fun, and I love going to it because it is a whole bunch of stuff I don't see in the United States, and so it's a great. We're hoping that that's going to be a great coverage, but I think that I'd be afraid of trying to get around if I was using something heavy. So I think that the AES and NAB is probably our next try at that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has a question for Alex. Hey, you mentioned using non-Blackmagic designed video routers for an integrated system like Office Hours 2.0. Wouldn't it be more straightforward to say with one vendor in simple software development and troubleshooting? Oh, yes. Yes, it would. And would I love to stick with Blackmagic on routers, and I can't. If I want to do 4K, on a router, I have to go to something else for anything larger than 40 by 40. It is a huge black hole in the Blackmagic product line, and it's super frustrating that they needed to upgrade this like 5 years ago, and then they haven't. Next question. Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. Nick J., what are your SIGGRAPH plans for SIGGRAPH 2022 in Vancouver, British Columbia, if any? Nick?
So I will be there. Interestingly, I will be the education liaison, the education chair for the 2023 SIGGRAPH in LA. So a lot of what I'll be doing is shadowing the current education liaison and following everything she's doing, because she has some really great ideas. And one of the things she's running is a Educators Day on Monday. So there's going to be a whole series of events before the expo floor opens specifically for educators. So if there's anyone out there, that would be a great thing to check out. Drexel University will have a booth on the expo floor. And so I'll be in and out of there from time to time. And I believe I'm going to be doing a talk on Tuesday afternoon in the educators forum area, talking about a symposium that we kind of started as in the education committee to have virtual events in between the live in-person events. And other than that, I just want to attend as many of the talks as I possibly can, because they're always phenomenal. So those are my general plans. That and Alex has started to talk about, something about walking the floor with a camera and talking about things. So it sounds like fun.
Yeah, I think we're gonna try to snare Nick into being a host for our little mess. So we'll talk more about that. Next question. TJ Asher, Minneapolis, Minnesota. My M1 Mac Mini has a tiny internal drive. Run out of room for my Final Cut project. Please recommend an external SSD for me that will work well with Final Cut. Go ahead, Mitchell. OWC is a great place to go because they've got all sizes, all kinds, all speeds. They're really good. G-Tech makes some fine drives. And we saw at Cinegear, Helix, a little company that made some super fast SSDs, one the size of a matchbook. It's amazing. I ordered that one, so we're waiting for it. It should show up today. So hopefully I'll get to take a look at it. I'm going to test it and just let it run a record off of a Blackmagic camera and see how it does. I do have one of the OWCs. This is actually sits on my desk for editing, and this is the Express 4M2. So you put NVMEs into this. This one's about 8 terabytes of storage that runs at about 2,200 megs per second, and so it works fairly well. I would highly recommend keeping your project always on an external drive. So always have an external drive that you're going to put your Final Cut events on or libraries on. And the reason for that is that Final Cut tends to build these preview files. It's rendering out these large preview files. So you open it up and suddenly it will fill your drive. And when it fills your Mac, it will corrupt your, not that this has ever happened to me, but it will corrupt your search results, your mail. It'll corrupt all kinds of things when it runs out of space. So you're better off always having an external drive that you're going to work with and internal. The only exception that I have is when I'm using large files. I use them in my studio, because the studio runs at 5,000 megs a second, and it's so fast that I still use the internal drive for that. But that's the only, and I do it very carefully because of that, because of the tendency for it to expand. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I've edited off the Samsung T5s just fine also. It's really a space. They don't come in a very large size, so I don't know exactly how much space you're looking for, but then I would definitely go to OWC or a SSD RAID solution if you had to.
Yeah, on fast turns, I don't recommend this on a general process, but on fast turns, I've literally just plugged all those T5s. They've been cameras, and I just plug them all into the same computer. I just start editing, because I don't have time to, and so, but that way I don't have to deal with the transfer times, and they will all read off, and they actually do better in a lot of ways because you have that transfer speed, or most of that transfer speed for each drive. Next question.
Paul Valhus from Austin, Texas is back. DJI has upped its gimbal game with the introduction of the RS3 and RS3 Pro models, along with the long-distance O3 Pro video transmission system. Both gimbals feature automated axis locks. Would you buy one?
Did we get the price on the new RS3 and RS3 Pro? I didn't see the price on them.
John mentioned it was $900 and $1,200.
That's great. I think they're great. I mean, I have an RS2, and so, but I think that the RS3s look great. I haven't looked at what all the upgrades were, because that event just happened this morning. So I was trying to get it up so I had notes, because I knew someone was going to ask, and it's not up on the website yet. And anyway, so I haven't been able to see it. But we should see if we can test one. Go ahead, John.
There's a standard and there's a Pro version. And they've got a LiDAR attachment on it, and they've got the focus wheel on it. And then they've got a wireless transmitter for it as well.
Looks amazing. Yeah, it's really cool. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, why do you think Paramount Pictures opted for a theater-only first release for Top Gun Maverick and not a simultaneous streaming on-demand release?
Go ahead, John.
You don't know if this was smart or lucky, but it was supposed to originally come out in 2019. And then they postponed it till the following summer. And then they held off until 2022. And people were dying to get back into the movie theater. So it worked out well.
Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, in the entertainment business, it's fun to see these tent poles coming back into the large venues that were just sitting there vacant for 2 years, and that Paramount was able to wait. Now, the challenge, of course, is the vendors that this movie's been prepared since 2010 when it was first proposed, so that they had to wait another couple of years. They picked the best time, and to that point, go to Box Office Mojo, and you'll see that $170 million that it cost them to make, well, they've already recouped into the point of $700 million.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, nowadays actors have a lot of pull on what the release is and where. And Tom Cruise specifically wanted the theater-only release, and he had a lot of pull for the event. And as Sky was alluding to, they had the biggest box office first day in recent history, which is a real good metric that everybody likes to use to compare the success or sales of a movie when it comes out.
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, plus, I mean, the demographic this film was targeting is perfect for going back into the theater. It's not necessarily like a kid's movie per se, so you bring in a whole family and buying lots of tickets. I mean, I've talked to buddies about, like, we need to go see this in the theater right away kind of thing. So I think it's also the type of experience that is tailor-made for a theater, like massive screen, big seating and all that. You couldn't really see the value of spending the money on the ticket and the ridiculous cost of a bucket of soda or whatever. And so it was the perfect recipe. And I think, didn't they time the release right around Memorial Day? So there's a lot of patriotism going on, a lot of thinking of military service and such. And so it was really the perfect recipe for a release. So really impressed, honestly, that they withheld the idea of streaming, because they've got Paramount Plus ready, but they'll have plenty of time for that anytime they're ready to put it there.
I think the only reason that it went straight to theaters first was because of Tom Cruise. Like he was basically like, he wouldn't promote it, talk about it, anything else that was there. He's holding Mission Impossible basically hostage. Like he won't finish Mission Impossible 8 until they promise that 7 will go to theatrical release. And so it's all about Tom Cruise. It on the surface, it looks like it was a big success, but it was a devastating impact on Paramount. So Paramount Plus could have acquired probably 10 to 20 million people who are paying $8 a month. If you do the math there, that's $80 to $160 million a month that they could have been acquiring instead of one. So they get one. This is a classic. This is why everyone's going straight to, because the subscription and subscriber paying every, and a big piece like this is a massive acquisition of new users who are going to, and then it gives you a chance to sell them on the Star Trek and on everything else. So people like me have not moved over, not added another subscription. Paramount came out too late and they're on their heels. And so the fact that they weren't able to capitalize on Top Gun is devastating. I mean, it's a devastating problem. So on the surface, Hollywood, who really wants theaters to stay alive, is, propping this up and talking about it and everything else. But I promise you that the accountants at Paramount know how much they lost by doing this, and it's a devastating impact on them. It doesn't make it just doesn't pencil out to do what they're doing here. So it'll be interesting to see. Go ahead, Mitchell.
HBO Plus seems to have a great model. They sometimes pre-release on their streaming service the movie, and then it goes to theaters, which is kind of the
it's making filmmakers very upset, because they have a way. A lot of this has the filmmakers feel like they have a ranking based on it's how if you do a $700 million film, it's a lot easier to get the next film funded. And so the thing is that they get more control, they get more power, they get paid more. With those big box office numbers, and so that's their kind of watermark for how they do their entire business. So we're talking about undoing that. And
essentially, they need to change their metrics. They're still old fashioned.
Yeah, it's just a conversion, but it's not a success for Paramount. It was a success for Tom Cruise, and it'll make good press, but it was devastating impact on Paramount because if they were already in the lead with their subscription service, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal. But they'll probably, their probably lost opportunity is probably over $1 billion. Next question.
James Babbitt from San Diego. When using the iPhone 13 camera with live photo turned on, the display gets brighter when switching to video. What causes this, and is there a way to have brighter low light photos using the live photo mode?
The video is showing you the HDR. That's why it gets brighter. It's like, oh, you want HDR video. The photo doesn't feel like it doesn't need to do that. And so it is important to see the HDR when you're shooting so that it'll turn up that. It also burns up a lot more battery and everything else for it to light up like that. So that is it did confuse me for a little while. Like, why was it doing this when I first got the phone? But it's just when it switched over. If you turn off the HDR mode, you should see it not do that. The camera is still taking great photos, but I don't believe it won't do live. It won't do HDR for live photos. It does just SDR for that. And I don't think there's any way to fix that. It's video because there's no format for it in the same way. So I don't think that you'll see it there. Next question.
Tony Mobley from Newton, Georgia. Panelist, what is the money, no object, office hours 2.0 dream setup, hardware and software?
Go ahead, Guy.
Just as the lawnmower people come. So we'll start off with noise assist because here's the lawnmower. You guys hear that? So we'll start off with sound devices mix pre. I'm going to eat into that to about -12 now. Actually, let's go big. Let's go to -16. So start off with audio. I'd probably go for a U87. I mean, money's no object, so we're going for an ARRI camera with probably some kind of Ingenue Prime. Or in a realistic world, John's got that camera, the 12K. We'll probably get that Fujinami Premista. Let's see, I'd go with this camera behind me is just a bird dog, but I'd probably go with a UE150 from Panasonic. I'd probably go with some P600s up there. I think that about does it for now. Oh yeah, bigger prompter. So this prompter is kind of small. I'd probably go with the bigger prompter, People 24. I think that covers it.
So yeah, I'm go with Guy and go with an RE camera, some Cooke anamorphic lenses, and a 25 foot wide by at least 10 to 12 foot high LED wall. That would be fine. That would be a nice addition to our
0.9 mil
system.
0.9 mil.
Yeah, 0.9 mil. That would be great. Yeah, and like 120 refresh rate. Be good.
Sky.
Well, let's go ahead and float the room in that case. And then, of course, are we getting, what kind of lights are we getting in? Airy? Are they going to be big? And then we might as well go with the crew. Since we're going all the way.
I wouldn't. The crew, though, you have to have them. The problem is you only had the budget to buy the stuff. Then you'd have an ongoing budget for the crew. That would be harder. I would probably go with the new Airy that just came out, the broadcast Airy, maybe an LF. I don't know. I think that would be probably that I might go down that path. Definitely the Ingenue. I think it's the 25 to 250 would be a good one to throw in there. But I would, just as an extra one, just for if I got the right Canon K35, it just looks very pretty. So that would be another lens that I'd consider. They're very hard to find, but if you can find them, they're great. I think that I would probably go with for telemetrics, heavy head for PTZ. So I had something to put that Airy on. I would definitely, U87 is definitely where I would go for the mic. I would use a Sound Devices Scorpio with noise assist if money is no object, and of course I'd run the whole thing on a black, I still cut it all on a Blackmagic camera, and on a Blackmagic switcher. I'm settled into that. I think the other switchers would just be too bulky. This one is just a rack mount that I can manage there. But of course, somewhere in the background, just in case I needed, I'd use a 4ME panel. That would be there. So I don't. If I had enough, if the room was big enough, if I could float a large enough room, I would definitely also get the LED wall for the background. But you got to have at least 10 feet behind you to make sure that the LED wheel doesn't cause issues with the compression. 0.9, of course, that's only going to cost $4 or $5 million for the LED wheel.
Define what you mean by float the room.
Floating the room means that I'm creating an air gap between the inside of the room and the outside of the room. And so basically it's an isolated air gap, which means it won't, if you float the room, the more space, the more air, the lower the wavelengths that you're going to block out. So if money was no object, I'd probably go a full 18 inches of floating the room, so that and then pack it with, and then have a lead lining, and then have then we put very thick walls into it to make sure I just absolutely can't hear anything ever when I walk into it. And then of course silent air conditioning. Don't forget the air conditioning, because it will be expensive and you'll want to keep it there. But that would be a big budget to be. That version is probably a $15-20 million version of what we do here for a lot less. In a more reasonable money is no object, I would probably still stick with the same switcher, but I'd probably go to the broadcast Ursas are pretty great. Just give you a little bit more control over those things. You can change the shims and so on and so forth. And so I do like the Fujinons. The Fujinon Cabrio lenses are pretty slick. Go ahead, Mitchell.
If you're going to float a floor, you want to use acoustic isolators in that air gap to keep the floor from bouncing or doing other problems that can travel, because vibrations in one room can turn into noise in another, because your floor will start acting like a speaker. And I'm with Nick. Those Cookes, they probably would look fantastic. My business partner works at a rental house, and I have an FX3. It's it's a low-end Cinel to camera from Sony. But he said, "What way do you do this?" And he popped a Cooke on there, and it just magically came alive. And I was like, "What does that box of lenses cost?" He said, about $250,000.
Go ahead, Lois.
So even though we are getting all this hardware, we're also having the show managed and staffed by people all over the world. So how about home delivery craft services?
There we go. That's perfect. And I'm just, let's see here. Let's go one more question. for the first
It's
hour.
from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. Is a used AJA Scion, I think is the word, 4K camera worthy of consideration when on a budget, or simply move on down the road?
It would have to be almost free at this point to use it. It was a great camera, and Stuart isn't here to defend it. So I'll be gentle. But it was a great idea, and it just was a little ahead of its time, and so it got ahead, and then it fell behind. But you could get a better camera for $1,500 at this point, $1,500 or $2,000. And so if it's $250 or $500, maybe you're still going to deal with all the legacy stuff that it has. It's got a lot of technical debt on it now. So it probably, again, poor Stuart's probably listening to us yelling at his screen in an Australian accent, but saying all Australian swear words. I don't know what they are. Anyway, but but I think that I would not get the Scion at this point. I almost bought it when it came out, but there was something, and I can't remember exactly what it was. There was something that was missing, and I just said, "Oh, I can't buy it." And then that was, I think that a lot of people had that. They made a great camera, and it was missing a couple things, and it's been too long ago for me to remember what those were. But when a bunch of us were like, "Oh, that looks great," and then we're like, "No, we can't use it." So I think that they just missed the mark there. All right. We are now changing subjects, and we have a special guest, Nick Jushchyshyn, who is back to share a little 3D wisdom with us. And this is I'm pretty excited about this. So Nick and I worked on a project last year with MetaHuman, and one of the most painful parts of it was not being able to really make someone make the MetaHuman look like the person that we were trying to replicate. And it was just one of those things that you knew that they had it back there somewhere, that they could do this, and we just didn't have it. And we did the best we could, and it was hours and hours and hours and many revisions to try to get something close to the person that we had there. And so they finally have answered our hopes and dreams by having this mesh to MetaHuman. And Nick will outline a little bit about how it works. Go ahead. And if you have questions, go ahead and throw those questions in now, or as Nick's talking. Go ahead, Nick.
Sure. So I guess I should probably share my screen, maybe. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that. I am allowed to do that. All right. Okay. So Epic dropped this on Thursday with absolutely no advance notice to anybody. It was just, and one more thing, right? And so this is the interface for this. It's a new plugin that works in Unreal Engine. I'm just trying to see if I can move this thing out of the way. There we are. Okay. So this is just an add-on for Unreal Engine. It's free. You download it if you already have Unreal Engine, the current version 5, and it lets you load in a 3D model of a head.
Now, how did you create this 3D model?
Okay. So creating the 3D model, I used photogrammetry. So I guess it would be worth mentioning that there is a video that I put out on this over the weekend,
and it went out on. It's linked. It's linked on our email that went out to you on Office Hours. So if you're, and we'll try to put it in the description of this YouTube channel as well.
Yeah. So basically, this is actually, I've been doing photogrammetry for a really, really long time. It was, I think, one of the very first things that I learned from one Alex Lindsay back in 20 odd.
What was it? What was the first thing that we did? I think it was like a P51, wasn't it? A P51D.
That was the first time that we did a genuine photogrammetry project together. But the first time I came across you, you were doing a seminar at University of Pittsburgh, and you showed two things: match moving and photogrammetry. And they have been the basis of my career almost ever since.
I'm glad I could be helpful.
It's like crazy. Yeah. But anyway, I mean, so
now, did you take all of these photos at one time, or did you take them?
This is a single camera. And so I have a student walking around me. Though we put these tracking markers in the background in the idea that would assist with the photogrammetry. I think it does help. None of them actually reconstructed, and meaning they didn't show up as geometry. When we use Agisoft Metashape, they definitely appear to help. They did not specifically register in reality capture, which is Epic's photogrammetry tool. The other thing I'll note about this is when you see these photos, you'll note that like there is very little shine on my skin. And that is not me. That's not makeup. That's not, using the right kind of paper. What's going on is the light is cross-polarized versus the lens. So let me see, maybe I should switch cameras here. So we did use strobes. So there were 4 strobes. There were 2 in front of me, 2 behind me. And they have, like you can put a color gel over lights, except it's polarized, right? So polarizing basically means that light waves can only move in one direction through that filter. Otherwise, the light is going up and down and sideways and diagonally and all of those kinds of different shapes. But the polarizing filter narrows it down to only light going in a single direction. Let's just say these are vertical. And then on the lens, we have another polarizing filter, and it's polarized in the perpendicular opposite direction. So if the light is polarized vertically, the lens has a filter on it that's polarizing horizontally. And what that means is that as the light hits my skin and bounces off and scatters, all of the scattered light has some horizontal element to it, right? The light coming from the strobe is predominantly vertical. I mean, some of it's getting through here because it's not mathematically perfect. I mean, it's just a sheet of plastic. And all that scattered light is going to make it through the polarizing filter on the lens. But the vast majority of directly reflected light is going to mainly be vertically moving vertical wave lights. And as a result, they get canceled out by that second filter on the lens. What I wanted to do is show, let me see here. I think, hey, there's my desk. Okay. So this is a ring flash. We didn't use that then, but this is what I'm using these days. The ring flash by itself eliminates shadows from your photos because the light's coming from all around the lens. So that's that step. But then we add this polarizing filter over that to get that vertical polarization on the strobe light. And then there's also a polarizing filter. I'm trying to figure out how to show this to the camera. That covers the lens. And so just to show the effect here, here's another piece of this polarizing plastic. And if I put it behind the filter and I turn it, there's going to be a moment when these are cross-polarized and that sheet should become pretty solid. Let me see if I can find the right spot. I don't know why it's not. Oh, I've got it backwards. That's why. It only works when you're looking through from the lens side. There we are. And there it is. So you can see, like, at a certain angle, that turns into a black sheet. And that means that it's cross-polarized, and that eliminates the specular highlights, the reflections on my skin in the photos, which then means that all of that, all the different blemishes and such on my skin are all that the photogrammetry software needs to see, and it doesn't get distracted. I mean, obviously it's not entirely perfect, but that's essentially what's going on there. So there's like 100 photos in there.
And I'm just going to show, just because we're talking about this, when game companies do this, there's a company called, was a company called Pixel Gun. I think they were purchased, but this is what their kit, their system looks like. So you'll see the same patterns that Nick was showing. This is actually in a truck. They can pull it up, or a trailer they can pull up to an arena for basketball players or whatever, it's 100, I think it's 156 cameras, and they just hit one button and it takes them all. And the advantage of that, Nick was able to generate this, but the advantage of this is it takes it all at one time, which means that you don't have to worry about subtle movement. You know, Nick is very good at being very still, but for a lot of people, it would be very hard to take the 100 photos without them moving enough that it undermines the solution. So having more than one camera does help a lot. Anyway, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah. So that is, yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't want to move. So I'm holding as still as possible. I'm trying to breathe very shallow. All of those types of things can contribute to error. But as Alex mentioned, those professional setups are they're going to be expensive because they're dealing with so many digital SLR cameras. And you could search Google for light stage. Dr. Dubovik, has a whole series of papers and such on these systems. And so there's a lot of ways of doing this if you have the full funding. But you can do this with just an iPhone, right? So your results may vary, but there's certainly, in fact, Reality Capture is beta testing their iPhone software. So you could actually build the model directly in the iPhone itself. In my case, I used the Reality Capture desktop software. So here's all of those photos loaded into Reality Capture. And essentially you bring those in, and there's a button somewhere in here for alignment, and you just align images or do a full start. And it goes through the process of essentially looking for any kind of unique pattern in the images, such as, this pattern of blemishes, these freckles, these little whiskers, etc. And where is that pattern appearing in multiple images? And it figures out where the cameras are, and then it figures out where those patterns appear in multiple cameras, and then constructs this 3D model. So Reality Capture comes in 2 license models. You can purchase it as a license outright, and I think it's a little over $1,000. But what most people will do is get the priced per image license. And so this is, I think, 86 images at 24 megapixel each. And the processing to result in this 3D model is like $1.30 or something like that. So it's very, very economical to do with the desktop software. And so this gets exported in a file format called FBX. And then that export gets imported into
and
Unreal
FBX
Engine.
is the best one is that the primary one to export out as?
OBJ also works. FBX is can carry more data internally. So with an FBX export, the textures are built in, and if you wanted to rig it and animate it, all that could be stored in that format. So that's where my go-to is. I'm
old enough to remember that FBX stands for Filmbox, which was the precursor to Motion Builder. So, but it was Filmbox when I started using it.
Yeah. I mean, when you introduced it to me. I think Epic actually has noted that for high resolution models that you can get more efficiency. It could be faster to import if you use OBJ, which is an even older 3D file format, but either one works. And so then from that, you open up this plugin, and there's a little button for adding in the 3D model. And so the 3D model is in here. Let me just make sure I've got.
And do you have to have the whole head?
You don't have to have the whole head. You can do, mainly a face. I would definitely recommend to get under the chin. Mm-hmm. So you get that whole shape, and back to the ears. Yep. That way, you really have the characteristics when a viewer or a camera is looking at a person, at their face. Right. You get all of those characteristics. So everything that you see here 3-dimensionally, I would recommend having in, but it's not absolutely necessary to have the back of this. Right. And then there is a tool that essentially does a track, and I guess I haven't done that yet here. This is done, neutral pose. So here's frame 0. So you basically capture a frame. It's funny, you've got this 3D model. You actually capture a 2D frame for it to run through a machine learning algorithm to identify the contours of the face. These contours are then mapped back onto the 3D model, and it generates a 3D model for you to review. So let's just see if I.
Okay, so it takes your scan and then builds its own model based on both your scan. And it's taking it of your scan, but it's not using the original geometry that you brought in. It's mapping it to that geometry. It's mapping this geometry to that geometry, right?
Exactly. And there's an A/B here. So I can take a look. Here's the 3D scan. And then this is the result. Now, this is the power of the plugin because it is spooky, but it's showing you the UV layout, which is really important for understanding the, we call it the topology. The shape of this framework is what allows the animation to work as well as the textures. So one of the things, for example, is you can see like this kind of semi-green segment is the location of the eyebrows. And so, the way the eyelids are shaped, all of this is rigged in MetaHuman. So I can actually come over here and then show you this. Here's that same result now moved into MetaHuman. You just push this button in Unreal, and it uploads this model into the website, the MetaHuman Creator website, where you can now customize this further. In fact, I probably should.
And that's the real power. I mean, what they're doing is really hard and really cool. I mean, and it's why I wanted Nick to immediately come on and show everybody this, because the ability to build. So the use case for this, of course, is there's a bunch of use cases. Obviously, there's use cases for games, but for previs, for instance, or film, I can now build something that looks, I could have an actor and take a bunch of photos and then immediately be able to have a digital double of them that I could use in Unreal for either previs or actual effect shots. Where it was something that I had to do that would have been very hard before. And so the ability, because the other thing is, it's not just building the 3D model, it's rigging the 3D model. And what they're doing is they're taking this photogrammetry of Nick, or what Nick's doing right now is taking the photogrammetry shot. That would have been still 2 or 3 weeks of rigging to get it to be at the quality that the MetaHuman's rigging. So just getting the model of Nick is one thing, but all the fine tuning of the morph shapes and all the other things that MetaHuman and Unreal are doing would have taken a long time to get that just right. Instead, it takes all that rigging that it already has and simply applies it and pushes it and maps it to that 3D enclosure, basically, which is what Nick provides it, or what you can provide it. And all of this is for just about free, right? To be able to do this, and which is just amazing, and so it is that now it's a totally workable solution to do this. So whether it's games, education, you could have things that you want someone to, you could build these from historical characters or from other things as well. You could have kids be able to be, you take pictures in your classroom of the kids and have them look like you put them in. There's lots of really fun things to do. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, no, I've seen some. I mean, people are doing some amazing things. This again has not even existed for in the public eye for more than a week at this point. Like, it was released, I think, Thursday of last week, and I did see one person was doing a project where the Smithsonian has a 3D model, FBX, I think, even of Abraham Lincoln's death mask, right? So back in those days, it was a thing to get a mold of someone's face after they had passed away. Yeah, right. So that 3D model could then be processed by this. It's not the whole head; it's just the the front of the face. But now they have a 3D model of Abraham Lincoln's face. Just as a comparison here. This is a MetaHuman that I tried before this feature existed. And so this is just taking all the existing parameters in MetaHuman that are all the template parameters and trying to blend them and get it close to myself. And at the time, I was pretty happy with this. Again, what happens in creating a MetaHuman traditionally, even that's only been around for a year or so, is you would select from an existing library. That there's a lot of people using this right now. I'm noticing that as I click between different interfaces, it takes a long time to load. But there's an existing library, a database of faces in the system, and you would choose from these and mix and match between them. Like, okay, I like this guy's chin, I like this guy's eyes, I want this guy's nose, and you could blend between those for different parts of the face, and ultimately land on something that resembles. And that's resembles your target, which is what Alex and I were doing in our project last year. And this is where I got even just working towards getting myself. And at the time, again, I was pretty content with this. What the plugin does is once it uploads that 3D model, is it uses, again, a machine learning algorithm to get the best possible mix out of the database first, because they're already rigged. And then it adds just one last little blend. And that's the difference that from that, here's what the database could create, and then just pushes it just a little bit more for a regular human anyway, to get that 3D model into the MetaHuman. And so here is this new feature, custom mesh. And so, for example, I'm just going to stop the animation for a moment. If we look at the nose, I can actually blend back and forth. Right now, I'm using that final mesh, that 3D model from the scan of my nose, but I can pull that out.
It's a very vision. You just look like this is the vision version of Nick. Doesn't it look
right.
like Vision?
Yeah, it is.
The Avengers. Yeah, anyway.
I'm sorry, Tony. I can't do that.
Yeah.
So you could see the database would have resulted in this nose, and the scan was this nose. And so that kind of reels things in. I've also seen.
Can you still add blends?
Yeah.
Can you continue to edit your face after you put it in?
You can continue to edit. Yes. So you enable editing. And when you do that, it says, do you want to duplicate and unlock? Which is a good idea, because you can keep this original.
Yeah.
And then now we have a duplicate.
So now you're blending, but you're also still pulling towards a custom mesh target. You can do both, right?
Exactly. So that custom mesh target is still in there, but we can activate blend mode. It's activated. So I could start, I'd have to add 3 characters here. Or what I actually like to do is just go right into the sculpt mode. Rather than struggle with these blends, at this point now I can start doing things like, all right, I feel like I want to pull the neck in a little bit more. And so I can do that. If I want to manipulate the nose, I can go directly into sculpt mode, skip over blend mode altogether, and make these adjustments. Maybe my ear should be a little larger, and I can do that. And I'm in symmetry mode. I can deactivate that, so now I can move this ear independent of the other ear, and add some asymmetry to the system. So this now starts to get into, now I can make artistic choices, right? If I want to be a little more flattering, I can go in here and pull the chin back a little bit and, take a little bit of weight off or whatever. One thing to note is that, I think another nicety of the fact that they're showing this UV map is that they're also flat out declaring to you, they're not taking the texture from that scan. And so I still need to add the skin texture here through the MetaHuman tools. But I can do that, right? So I can go ahead and assign a color. And so there's, a color. And then I need some amount of texture here to, kind of add a little bit of wrinkling or aging and freckles and such. So I can go to here.
And the power of this by not taking that photo is that you're now in the system that's there. So it is not, you can, everything here is editable the way that you would have it. So there is this kind of mix and match between the two. It's super powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you can, if you're, a skilled 3D artist can take these results and bring them into Maya and could blend between the material that the 3D scan would have generated, right? So you can project that, once you have this map. But a lot of times before I do a lot of adjustment, I like to kind of dress the subject a bit more. Like, so this is more hair than I have, but this is less hair than I have. So somewhere in between. I
do feel like they need to work on getting more hair. Like they haven't updated that for a year. It's pretty much the same hair we've had the whole time.
They have added some more styles. So with Thursday's release, besides this feature, they released, there's more hairstyles. They'll never, ever be enough. So there's always going to be a market for people. There could be more.
Well, I guess there's no like SDK for MetaHuman yet, is there? Like that. So what they really need to do is just generate.
You can do that though. Any Maya artist, for example, can bring in a MetaHuman head and use XGen and create a custom hair groom and bring that into Unreal and use. So you could, an artist, a 3D artist that knows hair systems, grooming systems.
But I think this is a good example though. If you were able to sell them in MetaHuman, or in the store for MetaHuman, and then let it do all the other things it does, but take these hairstyles and throw them in and sell them for $1 a piece or $2 a piece, they'd make a lot of money. Like I always feel, I'm always amazed that, especially they already have a marketplace. So being able to sell that in, hopefully we'll see that in the future.
Yeah. I mean, while we're at it, another thing that's been added is there's a t-shirt now. There's shorts and a few different kinds of pants now. There's like a yoga pants. I usually go with jeans. And the other thing is that you can vary the colors and even do patterns, right? So we can kind of do these 2-color patterns can be added, as well as graphics. So if I can get rid of the pattern and do a little graphic here.
And can you upload graphics to it?
So that's the funny thing. You can't upload graphics to MetaHuman Creator, but you can change them after the fact.
Right. You can take them in
Unreal. So this originally came in as one of those default graphics. The graphic itself,
it tells you where it is in the texture map, so you can see it in the UV.
Yeah, you can find it. Yeah, it's just a alpha channel. So red channel is color 1 and green channel is color 2. So you can absolutely adjust that after the fact. And what's nice is that still comes through with like all of this, fabric details. So I just put in a solid color for, this Drexel logo, but like this kind of fabric texture is coming through because that's just part of the material. So those are some of the additions. I think they broke out facial
now you
hair.
Can give yourself your own mustache. You can see what you would look like.
Yeah, I mustache that. I could. There we go. I can.
I think that's your future, Nick. Right there.
Is that my future? I can.
Oh no, the big bushy.
I could do. Sometimes I don't shave, so I can. Go long. Is there a stubbly? There we go.
Let's see rock.
Go long. There we go. Viking Nick.
There you go.
Here we go.
That's great.
So we can, and then I can add my salt and pepper. So color, custom. I think. Let's go details here. There we are. So I'm a bit older these days. But I guess I have to add custom first. There we are. So you get the idea. So all of this is another thing they've added incidentally is additional reference animations and such, right? So by default, there's like this idle animation going on, but now there's and I think there was a face range of motion, but there's additional options now. So facial loops. So there's happy and
weird happy, but happy.
Yeah.
Kind of like, hey, I don't really like you, but I'm smiling at you.
Yeah, exactly. Sad is pretty dramatic. This is definitely the MetaHuman watching Arcane. Anger. This is good for the whole, Viking look. So, so you get the idea. Amaze. And there's also a variety of poses, right? So, here's a fight pose and sport pose. So, you can test view.
Can you change the color of the background in MetaHuman to green? Because it'd be so much easier.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Actually,
so that you can key it. And then you make your own little.
So studio background color. Here we go.
Oh, look at that.
So there you go. So you can do that. So you could totally key that. I mean, there's a lot of really neat settings here, right? So I can make this outdoor and it'll load in HDR. And so you can see how this works. I'm holding the L key down so I can kind of rotate that HDR image that's doing the lighting. There's something here. It is Downtown Night. I think is actually based on a Matrix lighting scheme.
It's like Ninja
jumping over
Ninja
a car.
Nick.
Yeah, there's some nice little studio setups as well. So anyway, yeah,
it's great.
So yeah, I mean, honestly, if you watch the video is maybe 30 minutes long, and I think almost half of that is spent on just talking about the photogrammetry approach that I was using with the cross polarization. It really only takes a minute or so in the engine to do the actual, tracking of the 3D head and generating that this 3D model. I mean, it really is something that goes very quickly, like a couple minutes, maybe tops. The photogrammetry with those 86 24 megapixel images, local on my machine, ran in about 3 minutes. I do have a really beefy graphics board, so it is an A6000. Right. So others may take a little bit longer, but it's still we're talking about minutes really to go from there's a 3D model that has no rigging, that has awful topology. You could not animate in any way. It's just a rough model out of photogrammetry. And it's just a matter of minutes to get it into being a fully animated MetaHuman. So
I do see another lab wanting to be done sometime in the future, not too distant.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think this really opens the floodgates because it gets rid of that whole wrestling match of trying to get a MetaHuman that really, there is a little bit of, I do envision like this stampede into the uncanny valley. It's just like everyone, I think that it's good to set the level of expectation that you're not creating Benjamin Button here. You're not going to be fooled into thinking, in most cases, you're not going to be fooled into thinking that this is a real live human being. But
the thing is that the thing that I would do almost immediately with if I was still doing as many corporate events as I used to would be to get the executives to let me take pictures of them, so that every previs thing now is like we're putting Mark Benioff on the stage, and there's a picture of Mark Benioff. It's so much easier for people to visualize. It doesn't have to be realistic, and I probably wouldn't give it out very much because it could be used badly.
The thing is that,
but it would be really useful.
Culturally, we're also, I think we're moving the goalposts on where the uncanny valley is, and we're actually more and more acceptable getting into it, and just okay, well, that's a video game version, right? And this is the metaverse. Right. I mean, this is literally how that is being created, this whole virtual experience. And so I've already started working with a couple of clients on doing commercial versions of executives and doing kind of notional demos, examples of like, well, what could this look like in the metaverse? And so that's actually kind of been a stream of projects that have kind of come in the door. And this is definitely something that makes that far more achievable.
Absolutely. It's great. We've got a lot of questions stacking up. So we'll let Mitch throw in the what do we got coming up?
Well, I wanted to first say, Nick, there's a crisp $5 bill in it for you. You can do a 30-year-old version of me. $5 cash.
I just need that set of 86 photos, and we can
we'll work on it.
We can do that.
I'm available. Alan Scott from Fredericton, Canada wants to know, John Foltz from Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania says, Unreal plays better on a PC than a Mac. What PC specs are needed for a moderate setup?
So the main thing that you really want to go for is the best graphics board that you can afford that is in the NVIDIA RTX line. A lot of the rendering that is done in Unreal Engine is really optimized for NVIDIA RTX. So start there. And pretty much any CPU that comes with an RTX, say 3060, 3070, 3080, etc., is going to get you the performance that you'll need for all of the CPU tasks. Obviously, after you've put the money into the RTX board, whatever the fastest CPU you can still afford is going to do you well. And then drive space, lots of drive space. The typical MetaHuman project is going to be several gigabyte. There's a demo out there that is the Matrix City sample that is 100 gigabytes downloaded, and then it builds itself and it becomes another 100 gigabytes. So you can, in Amazon, I know you can subscribe to get pet food, pantry stuff shows up once a month. I really wish they would open up that service for SSD drives, because I could use that.
That's great. Next question.
Jason Panks from Nashville, Tennessee, suggested iOS app to scan using LiDAR and import into MetaHuman.
Almost any of them. Honestly, I haven't had that
the
fantastic
LiDAR
results with LiDAR. Yeah.
The LiDAR is not enough
faces.
resolution. It's not enough resolution.
And also, I think that the wavelength that those lasers are in the iOS devices, it scatters quite a bit in skin. And so I've actually had struggled to get, even at low resolution, a decent result with it. Photogrammetry is going to be the way to go for faces and heads.
Yeah, and I think that the problem right now is that the one that is the best one that I've used so far for photogrammetry is the Unreal, what do they call it? Reality scan? Is it not
reality capture.
Which I have the beta of, and I'm pretty amazed by the results so far. I think it's worked really well. What's great is the feedback loop. When you're taking the photos, it's giving you a really good sense of where you are and what you still need to cover. And it's kind of in real time, updating things and showing you like a base model and what's green and what's red. And so I think that's probably the best one. The reality is that you can just take an iPhone and start taking photos, right? You just have to, if you know what you're doing, you're systematic, you can take the photos that you need. The thing to always remember is that you'll be tempted, if you think of the head here, is taking a straight on shot. And you can take a straight on shot, but the ones that are the most valuable are the ones that are at an angle that sees this at an angle and sees this at an angle. Because the reason you want that is because it has vanishing points, and many cameras with vanishing points really helps a lot with photogrammetry. Anyway, anything else to add to that, Nick?
No, honestly, on my iPad, I'm using a completely free app called 3D Scanner app, and for LiDAR use, and it's been great because it exports in a variety of formats. But I primarily use that for scanning spaces and objects, like larger objects, furniture, and rooms.
Yeah, and I'm using Polycam for that. But the geometry that's generated isn't incredible. It's just I just use it for reference. Next question.
Jason is back, and his question: are these apps usable on an M1 MacBook Air?
I don't. Do we know if does Unreal Engine run on an M1?
So yes, I believe it does. I know that there are people doing that. I can't recall if you can install it. I believe you can. Actually, I think you can install Unreal through its standard installer on an M1 Mac. If I'm wrong, then I apologize. And I do know that people are running it, and they would have then had to download it from GitHub. You can sign up for free and download the source code and compile it with Xcode. It's a few extra steps. I definitely wouldn't recommend it. The graphics capabilities of an Air, are really optimized for basic video playback, video recording, streaming, that sort of thing. The calculations that are going on for the, solving 3D lighting and ray tracing and such are just not at all optimized for that. And, I know that, I was using a MacBook back in my digital domain days that I eventually melted the GPU chip off of the motherboard. I had to get the motherboard replaced because I was just doing so much 3D on it. And so I wouldn't want that to happen to your MacBook Air. So it's just not something I would recommend.
Next question.
Tony Mobley, Noonan, Georgia. Nick, if you were going to put what you were doing in a school, project-based learning setup, 5 to 12 grades?
Yeah, absolutely for grades 9 through 12. By then, your students are absolutely digital natives. 5 is probably early. I think it's
grades 5 to 12, so 10 years old.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying grade I feel like grade 5 might be a little bit early. I'm speaking grades 9 through 12 are I think students are ready for it. And I just, my youngest daughter is now, going into 8th grade. So, I may have lost visibility to what was going on in 5th grade. But I think that certainly by 9th, you're in good shape. In fact, I hope to create a series of videos specifically for high school students and teachers that are art teachers and how to get up to speed in this. But the students in particular, by then they've been playing all kinds of Fortnite things, and they've been configuring characters, and they've been networking with other individuals, so they understand the concepts. And a lot of the language that's used in these games, spawning and such, is the language used for the terminology for building things in the engine. So certainly by 9th grade. There is some material that Epic puts out for teachers. And so you could certainly, especially if you have students that are interested in computer programming, I think teaching computer programming with a game engine is absolutely the way to go. Like I think that it's kind of this whole dessert first approach. I mean, if you were to try to teach a young student computer programming and all they have is a terminal and hello world and look, now there's a box and it's moving, after they've been, they go home and they play 3D graphics on an Xbox or Sony PlayStation all day on their own, I mean, they will be bored and they'll think this is not helpful. But if you put a game engine in their hands and start teaching them how for loops work, how if then branches start working in there, they will dig into that and they will like, right. I can start to customize things. And another note is that I think Epic plans to actually release the entire Fortnite source code as a project for Unreal Engine by the end of this year, so that anyone could develop their own custom versions of that. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty cool.
That's great. Next question.
Dave Troutman from Edmonton, Canada. Just a little philosophical question. Does this imply all actors are now immortal?
I mean, there is an aspect of that that's already happening, right? So I think there was a big news push in the last couple of weeks about, for example, Notorious B.I.G., right? So he's coming back digitally and NFTs. So there is that opportunity for the estates of name personalities to continue the legacy of those performers. That type of fidelity requires more specialized effort than you would get out of just MetaHuman. But again, I feel like Unreal Engine and MetaHuman is kind of the gateway into the learning all of that. Alex, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think that I think you're right. For the last 15 years, a lot of actors have been scanning themselves over like once a year, once every couple of years, any kind of major change in weight or other things like that. It's not very expensive for them to do. And the reason they're doing that is specifically so that they can license their younger self back to a movie 20 years from now or 30 years from now. And the idea is they're not going to give it to them. They're going to say, you're going to pay me $10 million, but you want to use me from my earlier scans, it's another $1 million or whatever for that. So they look at it as an investment of being able to do it and the ability to really get a high fidelity version of themselves that can be licensed into perpetuity. Like literally, they when you talk to some of the folks that are doing this in LA, that's a very quiet thing that they're doing. They're not. I'm probably the least quiet about it, but the companies that do this they don't have big banners or big signs. It's an unmarked building. Someone goes in, they go in and get these photos taken, and they do it relatively regularly with some of the big stars because, again, it makes it much easier for them to build digital doubles. Later, it makes it easier for them to generate a truly accurate younger self, from those photos. It also means that, again, if they want to use Tom Cruise at 35 or 40, 50 years from now, they could. Like it would be, or they could do it anyway, but it would be much easier. And that's what the sell point is. And for a lot of these folks that, for the cost of a day of rent in their house or a day of their lease or their mortgage or whatever, they can they can get it, each year to do that. So it's definitely a lot of actors are thinking about it. They're not really. What I don't notice is a lot of actors thinking they're going to get replaced. If you're a good actor, I mean, it's hard enough to just be a good actor when you're competing with lots of other people that want to do it. They're not worried about that. They're worried about how do they make more money with their likeness, in that process. And so I do think that anyway, these are the
no. Yeah, I just thought I'd share that Unreal just released a series of videos yesterday documenting a lot of the work that they put into the Matrix Resurrections demo, which you can search for. And they did 3D recreate the younger versions of Keanu Reeves and Miss Moss. And they talked about the process that they went through with that. And in the case of Keanu Reeves, they were able to go back to head scans that had been done of him for those earlier films because there was so much CG work being done to him. There was a 3D scan of him.
Well, and we saw a life cast. What they did there is they actually cast his head. They built a cast of his head, and that was. It's a great way to do it because then you can spend as much time as you want with the cast. You don't have to spend as much time. We can do it now with photographs, I think, just as well. But the live cast was definitely something we used for when we didn't have the cameras that we have now.
Yeah. So if you search Unreal Matrix character, there's a 45-minute video to be seen that will show you a bit of that process. Again, one of the things that Epic does that I think is phenomenal is that they will take on projects with the idea that this is going to be learning and demo material for us. Yeah. And so, the Matrix Resurrections is a playable game that was downloadable for free on next gen. I think it's, the latest Xbox, the latest Sony PlayStation. And a lot of people at Epic work really hard at that and, creating the characters, but also creating this massive city and cars and collisions. And there's a movie that plays out and it's all in the game engine. None of it is rendered. It's just playing out real time. And you can download everything other than essentially the name characters. You can download as a demo and work with and learn from.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Is there enough base material to take, say, all of John Wayne's work and create a meta person for him and bring him back as an actor?
It's hard. There's definitely enough there. There are some learning model, some of the OpenAI stuff that's able to take those. They have taken a lot of those off the internet because people get so upset about it because they're worried about what the people would do with it. But it definitely can do it. So that technology is there to use basically artificial intelligence or machine learning really to look at many different photos. The challenge with general photogrammetry is that it wants all the things to have the same focal length. And so if you take all this historical stuff, it's not necessarily shot in the same focal length or in the same, it's not that it can't do it, but it's much, much harder. The machine learning techniques will actually can generate that 3D mesh, from you drop 1,000 photos and it's going to give it to you. The other problem is that person is different over 1,000 photos. So you really want it from a film stills. A film works really well because it was all shot within 3 months and there's almost every angle that's there. The hard part is getting the same expression and that's where photogrammetry kind of falls up, doesn't like what you're doing. Whereas machine learning can look at that and make decisions about it, and you can let it cook and it'll generate a 3D mesh for you. But that stuff has been very difficult to keep on the internet, for very long because the people who are doing it isn't like a person hacking it out in their house. And the people that do it are pretty sensitive to being attacked for doing it, so that I haven't seen it, but I've seen it work. I haven't seen it anywhere on the internet, which I find is one of the fascinating things, but it's definitely there. Next question.
Next question from Douglas Carmichael. Could you see this technology changing how filmmakers work in the future?
Yeah, Nick.
Well, yeah, and it's already changed how filmmakers work in the present. Already this is in use in, if you're watching most of the sci-fi or superhero series on Disney Plus, this kind of technology is already being used. A lot of what you're seeing happening and transpiring in the background is this technology. You'll be seeing that more and more. And this also, it's used in the process of planning a film, right? And Alex alluded to this earlier, where you can, with your iPad, LiDAR scan a location, and with a MetaHuman version of your actor, you can start staging all of your live action shoot for that location with all of the equipment and the lighting and see how it all plays out. Or you could take that scan of that room and just put it on an LED wall. Again, I think we were talking earlier about what would your unlimited budget thing be? Yeah. For me, it's an LED wall because that brings this virtual world and puts it in front of the camera lens. It puts it in front of that Cook and Ari setup, and then everything gets filmed in camera. So this is already transforming things, and particularly if you get into just filling out like that production value of large locations, casts of thousands, that has traditionally been only accessible to the highest budgets of productions, but now it is literally available for nothing to use. I mean, I'm doing some projects right now that are very, 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 very low budget, and there is cast of extras in the background of a New York looking city, and that's using these technologies.
Yeah, and as someone who started my career in film, working on previs for Star Wars, this would have revolutionized a lot of things, because it's just, we had rough versions of everything, and it would have just been great to put put a lot of the characters in, so that in previs we could visualize everyone. When they're out of focus, these work perfectly, like now, with motion capture. So in focus, they look great, but they're not, over the top. So I think that there is that, but I think that and for digital doubles, for stunts and everything else, there's just a lot of those kinds of things work really, really well right now, with what we're doing. Because when you see most stuntmen, you always see them cover their face when they fall, or they turn away from the camera. You always know it's a stunt person when they're not turning towards the camera. And these are going to make it a lot easier for you to actually do things with them. It's exciting. Next question.
Douglas is back. His question is, what utility are you using to connect to your PC to run MetaHuman Creator?
So MetaHuman Creator just runs, MetaHuman Creator is a browser tool. So it just runs in a modern browser. I'm using Chrome.
Next question.
John Snyder, Reno, Nevada. How would a person scan themselves when using an iPhone? How important is it keeping a neutral expression?
Go ahead, Nick.
It is critical to keep a neutral expression. The machine learning system is expecting a neutral expression. So even if you've got this perfect, high budget model, if that model is not of a neutral expression, the system's not going to work. So you need to keep that, and then you need to keep steady, and you can't even wiggle. So I actually would recommend against, doing a 3D photogrammetry model of your own head where you're operating the camera. If you're the subject, then you should really be simply focused on holding your expression and holding still. A lot of times we'll even use a C-stand, the knuckle of a C-stand, and just put that into kind of like the base of the back of the neck, just as a reference, and just to help the person just stay completely still against that. Because even a subtle movement side to side versus the background can throw off the calculation.
What does it do with hair? Like if someone has like a ponytail, would it be best to pull someone's ponytail straight up so that it just knows that's hair and still gets the shape of the back of their head?
I would put it in a bun at the back and top of the head, and then just delete it from the photogrammetry. A lot of times what will happen is the subject will be wearing a skin toned hair cap, and they'll pull the hair back as tightly as possible, and then put a hair cap over that. And so anything that's long hair would be, made into a bun as far back and high as possible. Mm-hmm. And then that gets deleted, and you're just kind of calculating for that cranium.
Yep. Yeah. Next question.
Vincent Alvarez in Bellingham, Washington. I'm trying to convince my wife on getting matching face tattoos. Do you ever see them allowing artists to upload tattoo art so we can get a better sense of what the final product will look like?
It's going to be a long one. I don't know if this is going to help you or hurt you, but,
right.
I'm sorry.
I mean, number one, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, honestly, especially after this release, it wouldn't surprise me if tattoo upload is not a future.
I think there's already I think there's some iPhone apps that let you take a picture of your arm and then put the tattoo on your arm and just show you what it would look like. Not that I have those apps or anything.
Ultimately, let me see if I can find this here. In Unreal Engine, there is a texture for the head that is, the skin. So you could export that as a file that you could open in Photoshop, and you could, essentially draw on the tattoo. Yeah. And there is a tutorial from Unreal out there that is customizing MetaHumans, and it literally is adding a tattoo to a face. And so if you wanted to follow along with that, that would get you there. And then you could you could see it in action in different lighting settings and such. Yeah. So it's possible.
That's great. Next question.
Tommy Shantz from St. Paul, Minnesota. Did anyone see the America's Got Talent with a 25-year-old Simon singing live through a singer on stage this last week?
Yeah. Go ahead, Mitchell. Was it on America's Got Talent, or was it just
Yes, and by the way, Simon claims that's the best performance that's ever been on the show.
I haven't seen it, so it's very good. Next question.
Next question coming in from Douglas Carmichael. I've heard of virtual concerts with 3D environments synchronized to music, but Windows leaves a lot to be desired in music production and audio management versus Mac OS. How do you coordinate, synchronize the virtual environment and the music?
So that is the job of timecode. So you can synchronize numerous instruments, the lighting instruments. So, if you're putting together a live in-person concert, there might be a DMX board driving the lighting. There's going to be media servers sending media to the LED screens and walls. You'll have music playback, and all of that is being synchronized through a timecode signal. And Unreal Engine supports timecode input and can be, staying in lock sync with that.
What's amazing is that you can buy on the marketplace, you can buy a stage with all the lights that you would have in a theater, and they're all tuned already. So if you play something in, play stuff into them, you can start controlling them immediately. They have all the lighting and everything else all built into them. It's pretty, and the whole set with the lighting is like $30. It's great. Next question.
There's a free one as well. It's the DMX demo.
Oh, the DMX. Yeah. So you can send DMX straight into it. Next question.
Yep. And send DMX out.
And OSC. So those that does both of them. Yeah. Next question.
Tony Mobley from Noonan, Georgia. Nick, what is the ideal setup for Meta, 3D, and Unreal Engine?
So, I'm sorry, a PC. A PC with, again, the most powerful NVIDIA RTX board you can afford. So I think the 3090s have been released. There's also, the 30 series is intended for consumers, and so you'll find that in gaming PCs. There is a studio grade product line called Quadro, and so I think I have a Quadro A6000. I can't recall if they've released anything beefier than that. So whatever you can afford there, that's what's doing the work, and so that's what you're buying. That's your computer. That's your graphics computer, and then whatever CPU you can afford on that platform to go with that, and then lots of memory. I wouldn't even try using less than 32 gigs, honestly. If you're going to try to do production work, I think my machine has 64 gigs, and then hard drive, SSDs, lots of SSDs. So,
next question.
Tommy Shantz, St. Paul, Minnesota. Has anyone tried monitor privacy screens as a polarizer?
I think that'd be hard because they're not really designed as something for film, to shoot through. And I think you'd probably have a hard time using them. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I put the link in for my favorite brand of polarizing filter. So yeah, you can get it. It's about $70 a sheet.
Next question.
Jason Panks, Nashville, Tennessee. Can you do a live motion capture using the MetaHuman, a la virtual person in a Zoom meeting?
Go ahead, Nick.
Yes, absolutely. So the MetaHuman system in Unreal Engine is designed to be able to receive motion capture data live. Usually there's 3 different capture systems involved. There's one for the body, one for the fingers, and one for the face. The face is typically a camera-based system, and all of those can be received independently by a single MetaHuman in Unreal Engine, and so you can operate it live. There's a little bit of lag, but you can operate it, and then you can record as well.
Next question.
Tony Mobley in Newton, Georgia. Nick, a lot of conversation of the giant screen used by Paramount Star Trek Discovery and other treks. Can you talk about that giant screen, please?
So the giant screen is, it's an LED wall. These grew up out of the LED screens that you might see on the exterior of buildings or used in rock concerts or national level, convention events and things like that. The ones used by top level productions these days are essentially especially built for that. They're components. They do go together like very heavy industrial Lego, so that those large walls are built out of a single panel components that connect to one another seamlessly, edge to edge. There is a system built into Unreal Engine called N Display, the N for any number of displays, and it's scalable. So as the screens like the ones at Paramount, I think Warner has one now that they've talked a lot about for Batman Returns. These will require multiple workstations to drive all the graphics simultaneously. And so again, those are synchronized with time code and Genlock. And so one machine might be responsible for the left side and another machine for the right side, another for the center, another for the area at the top that's shining light, that's your sky. And sometimes even another machine just for the little window that's in front of the camera. So if you've ever seen a behind the scenes video of them, as the camera moves, it's being followed by a motion capture system, and the system will actually render an image specifically for that lens to see. And so it's getting all the attention, and you can't see the edges of that window through the camera lens. So the camera lens just sees whatever, the city, the scene. But on set, you can kind of see this window floating around in front of the camera. So that technology overall is in-camera visual effects. And so essentially that wall, that screen is replacing the use of a green screen and putting all of the CG graphics in front of the camera lens. And, in the case of off-camera walls too. So these walls are so large because the side walls are actually used to light the talent, right? They're not being seen necessarily by the camera at all times, but if you put the sun on one of the side walls, then your talent is lit by that light. And if you put a gray sky, or a red sky in the above walls, all of that's being updated at once. And so that's called in-camera visual effects, and it's a subset of what virtual production is.
Nick, thanks so much for coming back. And
yeah, thanks for having me.
Joining us. It's always great to have you here. So hopefully we're going to try to get, based on Nick's time, we're going to try to get him in at least once a month to show us something cool. So stay tuned for all of that. And thank you to our great questions from our producers. Thank you so much for that. Thank you to the panelists. Can't do this without you. And thank you to the behind the scenes crew making all of this happen. It's always a big lift. And I always forget to say it, but we have these great sessions at 9:00 with Ken Jordan talking about web development. And so I just want to make sure you know that that's happening right now in After Hours. All right, here we go. I'm going to go make a MetaHuman. I'm going to take pictures. I didn't think about using
How will we know if you're here?
20. I'm just going to have it nodding a lot. There's going to be a lot of. I was thinking we could fill in any open gaps. So we have a grid of 16 people, but we only have 12. We could have like 4 metahumans in there just nodding.
20 year younger version, a 30-year younger version
with a big beard, crazy hair.
Big.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
tattoo.
about.
Just say no.
Face tattoo.
So cool.
Thanks, Nick.
Great one, Nick. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Nick.